Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on Forging Your Career Path and Designing Your Life. We have joining us two wonderful speakers who I will have them introduce themselves. My name is Yulia Dennis, and I'm the Director for Alumni Career Services at OSU Alumni Association. Really excited to bring this topic to you. Feel free to put questions into the chat. This will be an interactive Q&A session as well. And then with that, I want to mention a couple things. One is that this is a partnership with our College of Liberal Arts, and really excited to be bringing Jessica and Russell on board and having them speak on this great topic. This is one of our most popular topics for us, registrations, et cetera. And we have lots of questions that were submitted through the registration process that we'll be addressing. And also, like I said, feel free to put your questions into the chat box. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to introduce herself.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica. I'm a 2008 grad from the College of Liberal Arts Fine Art program. I worked in the fine arts and culture industry for a long time before moving over to corporate, and I'm currently a project manager in finance over at Adidas, and I'm really excited to chat with everyone today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jessica. And then we'll have Russell introduce himself as well.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, really nice to be here with you all today. Thank you for taking the time. I also was a grad of the College of Liberal Arts in the Fine Arts program, graduated in 2006, I believe, so long ago. After graduation, I took on a lot of freelance work and went into a graphic design industry, working at various companies, international, local, and also lots of freelance. To the point now where I joined kind of more of the corporate world with Jessica here at Adidas. I manage the North American brand design studio there, and I've been with Adidas for about 4 years. But I'm really happy to chat with you on this subject today.
Wonderful. Thank you for those introductions. And the way that the webcast will work today, Jessica's going to share her tips on key elements of making career decisions and then what it takes to successfully start a new career. And then following that, we'll have Russell share his tips. So Jessica, take it away and share.
Thanks. Yeah, I think 5 tips might sound maybe more prescribed than I'm going to share, but throughout my journey through arts and culture and nonprofit world into corporate, I definitely learned some things along the way. And so hopefully you learned some things from my learnings, my mistakes, some of my successes. So I'll try to share 5 of those with you now. I think the biggest thing that I learned that I took away from this experience, and just kind of like all scary experiences in life, is that fear and anxiety are not the same thing. What I've really learned from anxiety in general is that that's usually pushing me towards something really positive or really powerful, and I'm just feeling kind of nervous about it, kind of like today, you know, feeling that adrenaline of something unknown, but it's not a fear-based feeling. It's just, I don't know what's coming and I need to follow my gut and go through with it. So maybe that's my number 1. Number 2 is actually something that I've really learned this year going through my career at Adidas. I've been what is called an external for a long time, or an internal limited duration contract, which basically means I'm either contracted by a different company to work at Adidas, or I'm contracted by Adidas for a prescribed shorter amount of time. And I was in that role for about my whole career at Adidas up until actually a couple of weeks ago, when I finally got converted to a regular employee. But really just that internal stress of not knowing what's next, I had to really reassess sort of or not reassess, but stop and think about my hierarchy of needs. Like Maslow's hierarchy needs is literally what I'm talking about. But during the pandemic, when I was sort of facing down the end of a contract, not really understanding why I couldn't see beyond my current role or where I wanted to be, I didn't have a strategic thought about what might come next because I was so consumed with the stress of making sure I was going to have money to pay my housing or my medical insurance. It was just like not having your base needs, your roof, your food, your health, your that base of the pyramid covered. You really can't operate out of a strategic like brain function. You can't think strategically about what you would like to do next or what a logical next step would be for you. So just acknowledging like if your needs are met, and if they're not, then that's okay. You do not need to have a 5-year plan when you're also worried about how to pay your rent. It just makes going through interviews and stuff, I think, really challenging, but it is okay. It's okay to feel that way. It's okay to feel stressed about that stuff. And it's okay to do what you need to do to survive when you're going through these interviews. I think I was putting a lot of pressure on myself in that situation that I was like, I'm not thinking about this as strategically as I would like because I'm so worried about what will happen in the time of a pandemic and being jobless. So it's okay. You just need to take time to figure that out. I think that brings me to my next point, is that success is not linear and that there are no steps backward, even though they may feel like it. And if you end up taking a role to cover that like base of your pyramid, it's okay. And it's not necessarily a step backward. You're not making negative progress. You are going to find transferable skills or experiences in whatever you do. And hopefully you find the positive in maybe taking a step back or starting over at a different company. That will show your resilience as well. So that's kind of like 1 and 2, is that success is not linear ever. It's never been. And that there are no steps backward when you are thinking about your career progression or your career journey. And then that leads into the 5th one too, which is, I think I already touched on, but all your skills, all your experiences are transferable. And it may take some practice. Practice is what makes you stronger. Practice is what makes you confident. Confidence doesn't come naturally overnight to every single person. Confidence comes from practice. Your skills are transferable. You just have to think about them maybe in a different way than you are thinking about them right now. So those are my top 5 or 6 learnings I've kind of experienced the past trajectory of moving from nonprofit arts into Adidas.
That's great. Thank you, Jessica, for sharing that. I especially love the idea of no steps backwards. All skills are transferable, and then practice makes you perfect, or makes you stronger. There's a couple questions 3 questions that came up through the registration process that I'd love to ask right now and have you share. The first one is, especially when people are shifting careers and maybe they're not sure of what they want to do you recommend part-time or temporary jobs in between doing career shifts?
Yeah, I do actually. Just something that I believe in is saying yes to experiences within reason. You do not want to go outside of your personal safety or comfort zone, but try it. You might like it. You might meet someone who can bring you to the next step. And especially in places where it's kind of notorious to get into. I think Adidas might be one of them, but that's how I got into my role. I came in at a 5-week part-time gig that I actually turned down something more stable that I don't think I would have liked as much, because I knew I felt more strongly about how I was going to feel working at Adidas. So I took the chance. I took a 5-week role for something that I had no idea would turn into something longer, longevity. So I say it's worth it within reason, for sure.
Thank you for that. Another question also for you is someone said they're struggling with learning about career journeys, and then how do you balance uncertainty with practical needs, which you addressed with the idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then doing reflection questions, activities. Are there activities that you would recommend for people to reflect? And this can be across the board, whether it be a recent grad or someone who's been in the career for a while. Anything that really helped you as you were doing your career shifts?
Yeah, I think something I actually do try to do on a regular basis, maybe every year or half year. It's an activity called the Wheel of Life, and it's really just a personal check-in to measure where you're feeling for certain things, everyday kind of buckets. So like finance, love, career, family, things like that. So it's going to shift quite often, but at the end result, when you do your Wheel of Life, it ends up looking kind of like a spider web. So it really can show you visually where you might be feeling depleted, and how you can, it will just kind of open your mind to how you can start to serve those needs. You can Google it. I think there are a lot of different online versions. Wheel of Life, I think it's called like Web of Life in some instances too. Self-reflection is a really big thing. I think when you are trying to balance a career pivot with meeting needs, things like career aspiration maybe kind of go out the window, but and like I said before, that's okay. It's stressful and it's scary, but no one is going to ever hold it against you for taking a job that you you needed at the time, especially if you were in a time of need or you just felt like job insecure for a certain reason. Especially when you can identify that the skills you had or the experiences you had during that role or side gig or part-time role really made you a better employee, a better person, a more well-rounded viewpoint on the world.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Another question, Jessica, that came up is, what about technical skills? I'm not sure, the person said, I'm not sure my current technical skills are transferable to another field I'm interested in. We know that right now there's a lot of change happening with technical skills. What kind of recommendation do you have for people who are trying to either learn a new technical skill or they need that to transition to a new field or a new job?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So my personal experience as a project manager, I came in to this role without any sort of certification and really feeling insecure about that. I'm not sure, especially going into like a corporate setting, how much the company cared about certification and trainings. So my first instinct is to tell you that technical skills can be learned on the job, with a caveat that maybe if you are trying to be a doctor or a mechanic or something that you need to know these skills right off the bat, then maybe stop and learn those before you try to jump into that role. But technical skills can be learned on the job. And if you can't find, or if you're hesitant to apply for something that says on paper they need a certain technical skill, I would say don't hesitate. If you feel confident you can learn this skill, don't hesitate, just apply and have that conversation. Google it, do whatever you can to sort of get the baseline knowledge down before you have these conversations, and go for it. I mean, they won't be hiring you based off your technical skill alone. And you can always do coffee chats with folks who are in that role, ask them how they got to where they were, what route, do they think that certifications or educations are really mandatory, important. I think as we move into this new space, I think certifications and stuff they're still important, but I think that I've seen certain lines on job descriptions sort of fade away a little bit. So just apply and see if you can get your foot in the door before telling yourself you're not qualified yet.
Thank you. I so agree with that. And then there's also other ways that people can get those technical skills. From what I've seen as far as working with alumni, people do free classes, or like Jessica said, there's various certificates you can do. And if you are applying for a job that requires a lot of technical knowledge, I loved what Jessica said about just talking to someone, reaching out to them and saying, hey, how did you get this job? What did you do to get here? And that generally helps a lot. Jessica, one more question that came up through the Q&A for you is, in your experience, what are the most important soft skills needed when making a career transition? And you were mentioning that a little bit towards the end there, saying people aren't necessarily going to hire you for those tech skills. So what kind of soft skills do you think are the most important?
That's a really good question. I think there are so many different kinds of soft skills that make everybody who they are, and they're a lot different in each person. But I think that a valuable employee is someone who can see a problem or a conversation. They can just really put themselves in someone else's shoes, or see a problem from a different viewpoint than the rest of their team. And I know that maybe is something that can be really scary. But if you can be that one person for your team, or kind of be the outlier to say like, hey, maybe let's look at it this way. Bring in this cognitive diversity, that this is not, what am I trying to say? This is not a like a daisy chain or paper chain of just we all think the same, we all do the same thing. We really need people who can see the way we do business from a very different vantage point. And it's really valuable to be able to say that. I mean, that's something that I actually do in my role all the time, working in finance, that I am maybe the only person who's come from the arts degree in my whole organization, that I'm just can say, hey, actually, I might not know about your finance process, but the way I'm looking at it, I can see a hole right here. Is that the case? And we can start a conversation about it. So that's something that's on my mind a lot. Soft skills can run the gamut. I mean, it's between just like active listening, calling on folks in the room that maybe aren't speaking up, and just being a really like collaborative person. We don't all want the same, but you need to find like your internal soft skills and what you're good at, and maximize those. And you can always work on the ones that maybe you're not as good at, but we don't want to be a super homogenous group, right?
I totally agree with that. That's a really great description of soft skills. And with that, we'll turn over to Russell, and Russell's going to talk to us about his tips for how to plan your career path, and then how to overcome challenges that come along the way. And really excited to hear from Russell as well. So with that,
Hi, thank you so much. So how to plan your career path, 5 tips. I really kind of had to take a little self-reflection on this, because everything's changed and everything is so much harder and different. But and I'll hope that my tips don't overlap too much with Jessica's, but I do think we have some similar takeaways. I guess number one that I'd say, and this is tremendously more hard today in our current reality, but for me, getting myself out there, and in a COVID safe way, that looks very different than it used to. But getting yourself out there is a huge task. For me, I would be nowhere without the support of my friends that I've made. And they've been, I can look back at every job I've gotten, or freelance contract, or just in at a company. Every single one of them has been from a connection I've made along the way. And no more important is it that I think than today, to foster a really strong connection of friends and colleagues and people that support and help each other out. I I can imagine all the people shaking their heads, thinking that's so impossible today. But I've been challenging myself too. Is just, even at my own company at Adidas, there's hundreds of people I don't know, and times that I've decided to say, hey, who's someone I don't know or I'd like to get to know better? And can I just reach out with an email and a generous ask to just get coffee and see if they would return that generosity? And I'll talk about generosity a little bit further, but that's been really helpful and try to get me through these times when, you know, meeting up at a bar or a restaurant or running into someone you've never met before is seemingly impossible. But getting yourself out there, however that looks for you, is one major tip that I've learned from or gain value from. The second thing is really more about, I guess, a balance in life. And I think about balancing what you're passionate about with, and this maybe sound overly practical, but balancing passion with what you're already naturally doing. For example, you know, I've always loved art, and I got a degree in painting and sculpture from OSU, and even went on to get a master's degree in sculpture, really pining for this idea of a studio artist life. Uh, Not realizing that for the past 5 years, while before getting my master's degree, um, I was spending almost all of my time, when it wasn't pertaining to school and sculpture and art, doing design work, you know, designing furniture or logos or homes or anything like that. And it took me some reflection to say, oh, I'm not making an identity shift by going into the design industry. It's more of a reflection on what I'm already doing, and feeling really good about a groove, a good groove that you're in, that you just need to recognize that you're already doing. That is, if you're still, you know, trying to balance that idea of like, I've got this passion, but I don't see the industry for it. Well, maybe it's there. Maybe it just doesn't look the way you think it looked. Like my studio artist profession isn't there for me, but that doesn't mean I'm not still pursuing those things and, you know, having exhibitions, doing things in my studio arts at home, but pursuing something that's still really passionate to me in the design world. The third thing, I think for me, this isn't maybe for everybody, but it's to make a schedule. Um, Very practical, but I can't personally keep moving towards a goal without actionable steps and accountability. You know, for a while, I was even so rigid that I would make sure that I'd have my day job, whatever that was at the time. And for me, it was like lots of freelance or odd jobs before I landed this job at Adidas. You know, your day job might be 8 hours. The next 8 hours of your day should be pursuing your career dreams, whatever that looks like, studying up, learning new skills, and then you eat and sleep for 8 hours. I know that's like kind of like crazy and rigid, but for a while I was like, you know, I've got the energy to keep my day job, learn the skills that I need to get to the goal I want, and then still have some time left over to eat and sleep. Now, that's not very pertainable probably to me anymore. I can't keep that energy level up, but I still do think that accountability and a schedule is really important. On the accountability side, I think it's really important to just tell people what you're trying to accomplish, the career objectives that you have. You know, for me, putting it out there to say to my friends or family, I want to go do this. That kind of is like something about putting that intention out into the world. You know, not just in a kind of, you know, energy, like kind of loose, soft science kind of way, but really literally telling people that you intend to do something tends to hold myself accountable to do those things. Um, and then let's see, I think the next thing I wrote down was similar to Jessica's, like sort of like finding that mentor, finding a person who's doing the thing that you want to do and ask them about it, ask them how they got there, build a relationship, build a rapport, which then feeds back into that idea of building that network of people who support you and maybe push you into opportunities that you wouldn't have known existed in the first place. But that mentor, or that, at least that like model career, that person that's in the career that you want to be in, find those people and talk to them. People are more generous than you think they'll be, to share about their life and the paths that they took to get to where they're going to be, which completely aligning with Jessica here is like, that is not a straight line. And you could find someone who, has that end goal, but their path might have been crazy like this, as well as yours will be. And that's okay. And all those skills add up and actually kind of, they add up in a multiple of ways, and you don't know that the skill you had or the thing you learned in your past career is adding to what you're doing in your next one. And then I'm sorry, I think I was supposed to also go into overcoming challenges along the way. So for this, there will be challenges. Take failure with stride and learn from them. The two people you don't want to be in this world is those who are too fearful to take a leap, or too fearless to change themselves for the better. There's so many people, or especially in my industry of designing and artists, people who are so confident in themselves that don't understand that their work sucks. But also so many people who are too timid to even put a foot out there. And so that is a real personality challenge. Even me today, like I actually really, I'm terrified of public speaking, and knowing that there's maybe 100+ people really got my nerves going. But those are good things to challenge yourself to do, and to step out and combat that fear. Let's see. I was also going to say, I got some notes here. Also learn when to quit. When you're overcoming challenges along the way, there are careers that are just going to be dead ends, and it's okay to quit. It's okay to say, this is not working and I need to go a new path. Sometimes I can be so stubborn to accomplish the thing I set out to do that it can actually, take me down the wrong path that I don't want to be on anyway. So understand that failure, quitting, those are also negative. But if you're intending to quit something that's not right for you, that's good, and you should feel confident in that decision. And then finally, I think being flexible with those challenges. What you set out to be may not be the viable career later, or even the career you want to be in later. Don't overly specialize at first. Learn a whole lot of things about the field you're intending to be in, until you find that groove, and just keep learning. I just can't pressure that enough. I might have an art degree and a design degree, but now I find myself balancing giant budgets, and I needed to learn how to manage profit loss documents and all sorts of things that were not part of my mindset or thinking from undergrad or graduate school. But keep learning. Those would be my tips, I guess.
Thank you, Russell. And I took away a lot of nuggets of advice there. I got the importance of connections, finding a mentor, finding someone who's doing what you want to do, actionable steps, and also the idea of being goal-oriented and telling people your goal, and that it's okay to quit. I think those are really great piece of advice. Many people had interest in learning more about your experience, especially as a freelancer, and I have a number of questions tying to that. The first is, someone said most career path advice is aimed at freelancers and or people in creative settings. And then what about positions that are in more matrix or rigid organizations that also use those skills but are more rigid? What kind of advice do you have for them versus the freelancers?
Yeah, so kind of two answers, I guess. Freelancers, in my experience when I graduated in 2007, there's a 2008 economic crisis, and we're now entering another one. And the idea of being multifaceted was really important as a freelancer. So that idea of not overly specializing at first, I think, is really valuable to say, what's the field I'm entering, and how well can I know all the components of that, so that you can be a valuable team member, if it's a team, or just valuable like personal freelancer to get a project, market yourself, whatever it is that you're doing, and execute on it. So I would say, like being, I don't know, I think that our society sometimes doesn't like to value the people who are like the Swiss Army knife type person, but really values the specialists. And that's great. But at first, like, you really want to learn the broad strokes of the whole industry that you're entering, learning all the different parts and pieces of it, to really know what you're great at and what you're excited about. And then as far as like a big matrix organization, like Adidas really is a giant complex matrix, you tend to start to specialize, but things shift all the time. All of a sudden in COVID, we shut down all of our retail. So that the designers that were multi-versed in retail designing, but also with digital, were the ones more likely to stick with the team. And that maybe wasn't obvious to people to say, well, I don't want to just be a specialist. I want to, learn all the different landscapes and languages of design. And they tend to be the most resilient to change, and not getting too frustrated by it. I don't know if that answers all your questions. Feel free to follow up with details if I didn't answer what that person asked.
That definitely answered it. Thank you, Russell. And then, as I said before, lots of questions about the freelance part of your experience. One person said, as a freelance graphic designer, I'm very interested to hear your journey, and then also how you navigate the freelance challenges yourself. Sounds like, again, lots of people have questions about that. And then a follow-up to that is, what are ways that you marketed your freelance business, and what kind of recommendations do you have for people? So two-parter, challenges and then the marketing piece.
Yeah. So the freelancing I did, at first it was definitely just people I knew that needed some graphic design work done. There's a lot of giving out your labor for free that I at least experienced. That is a balance you have to strike. Few people, especially if they're not a personal connection to yours, is going to hire someone without experience and a portfolio. So you definitely need to build that. But be careful with that. A lot of people will take advantage of someone who, and I experienced it a ton, where someone would say, oh, well, we don't have a whole lot of budget, and this is a good portfolio experience for you, which was code for, we don't really trust your work yet, and we want to get something for free. And so, and that, that's disheartening. But there's a measure of that is important, to just build an experience and build a portfolio. Be selective with who you give your time out for free. You really want to build a portfolio that shines well upon you. I had a lot of challenges where, I was just needing a job or a contract. So, one example of this, like, very cheesy jewelry craftsman in Brooklyn that I did some work for, and it was not my best design, and it was not something I want to put in my portfolio, but it was a good learning example. So don't say no, but just be careful. And then what was the second part of that? I'm sorry.
So the marketing piece, lots of people had questions about marketing yourself as a freelancer.
Yes. So marketing, I relied on word of mouth a lot. Just doing a good job tend to bring more jobs. But then for me, at least back when we could be around, it was meeting people. It was really just being out there. Like I mentioned in some of my 5 tips, is like getting yourself out there and meeting people. But I didn't do any mass marketing. It's not like I was, putting advertisements out. I would just look for opportunities, and that sometimes would be a job posting or a gig on. Back then, people did a lot of reliable gigs on Craigslist. Not so reliable anymore. But I would put some proposals out there. Another way that I found some success was looking for an opportunity, whether that's a business that doesn't have a good identity or design language, and building one for them and proposing it. Sometimes you can build a pitch to a company and find out that they really do want those services. And even if they don't, it's a good portfolio piece. So I definitely recommend building that broad portfolio to make sure that you look like you're capable in doing anything.
Great, that's some great advice. a few more things that came up through the registration process. Someone said how to restart their career after taking a break, especially to have kids. And from talking to alumni, that's been coming up more and more, where people are stepping out of the workforce during the pandemic to take care of kids or their loved ones. And that actually ties in really well with one of the attendee questions that just got posted as well, which is a similar thing. In this case, so it's a transition from being a grad student to then graduating and being in the workforce and being out of the workforce for 6 years in grad school. So essentially the question is, how do you get back into the workforce, whether you're out with taking care of children or loved ones, or being a grad student or a student in general? And then what tips do you have for hopping back in?
Great question. Yeah, I mean, I similarly took a break from a lot of my careers to go to graduate school. For me, I tried my best to stay sharp on my design skills, and getting some little jobs here or there. Thankfully, I was in a creative school anyway. I was studying art, so I wasn't completely off. But yeah, it's definitely staying abreast of the newest technologies, whether that's newest software. I think just refocusing yourself that this is the career you want to be in, and regaining some of that passion that you had before. It's hard though. I mean, with a long break, um, I think that people are maybe too afraid of seeing that gap in their resume. And I know from being someone who hires a lot of designers, I'm not so worried that there's like a 2-year gap in someone's resume, as long as that resume tells a story and shows what you're capable of doing. Because I know that when I'm writing my own resume for applications of stuff, I'm like so concerned about those dates and that they all look right. When I'm hiring people, I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at what they can do, measuring a lot of their soft skills, like how personable are they, how well are they at listening, are they just, even just the basics of being a responding, like good communicator, and that their skills are backed up by some experience. So I wouldn't be overly afraid at a big gap, unless it's, a 5-year gap and you feel like your experience of the Adobe suites or other software and technology that you need in your career is way behind. Then that's time to bone up on the newest technology and take some courses. There's a lot of great examples on brilliant teachers that are not maybe accredited all the time, but sometimes they are on the internet, teaching you how to learn new things. I just learned Blender, this new 3D rendering program, from some YouTube stars, and it was actually really helpful and really good. So yeah, always keep learning, but not be too afraid that you're going to be criticized for that gap.
Excellent. Thank you, Russell. And with that too, so in thinking of the people who take a break and also your earlier advice about connections, what advice do you have for people about networking in the midst of a pandemic? How do people do it, especially if we're more or less all stuck at home? What's your advice for that?
That's a great question. you know there are a lot of great organizations still out there. I was participating in Design Week Portland, where they went all virtual, and it was actually wonderful. I thought, how is this going to happen? Am I going to even get anything out of this? But there's a lot of great companies still trying to get out there and connect people to other people. Look them up. I had a great time with Design Week Portland and met a lot of great people. And so I recommend those. The whole world is in the same boat as us, trying to figure it out. And a lot of people have done a really good job with it. So yeah, I would find those conferences, those virtual hangouts, the things that people are doing to grasp at our social connections as well as we can in this unprecedented time. Is that the terminology of the year? Unprecedented.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And if anyone out there needs help with either their career transition or looking at how do you network right now, definitely reach out to me, and I'd be more than glad to help. This next question that I have is for Jessica. And Jessica, the question is, did you always know what your current career is? And if not, how did you go about exploring your options?
Did I always know that my current career would be my career? Is that kind of the question? I'll pretend that it is. And no, the answer is no. I always thought I would be in the arts forever. I thought that from a young age, I really thought that that was my my long-term plan. And I don't think it that didn't love the arts anymore, but I really came to choosing, I think I'll go back to that like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It really came to choosing what I love to do in the arts and getting healthcare and getting paid better for those things, and still leaving room for the personal enjoyment of the arts that I can do in my own time. I help a lot of artists kind of like freelance for fun, and that fills my that like part of my heart. So with that said, I love my job. I actually really like what I do, but it was not anything I ever thought it would be. So moving into corporate world from the arts nonprofit world, it was really scary, and I felt like I might be selling out. And especially when it comes to things like, well, I just really feel like I need to be paid more because it's hard for me to live on these salaries. That just didn't feel like a good enough reason at the time. But once I got that stability, or the not stability, but realized that in order for me to feel safe and secure and be strategic and happy, I needed to have my needs met. And that's good for me. Like that's good for all of us to have. So yeah, it was a weird mental journey, and it wasn't an overnight joyful decision for sure.
Thank you for sharing that. And a follow-up question also from the audience is from people who are wondering how can they explore what they can do with the degree that they possess, and what would you recommend that they go about exploring their options?
That's a good question. I think that I'm a great example of the degree that I possess. Both my my undergrad in fine art and then my grad degree in museum studies does not define who I am or how I will necessarily perform in a role. So it's about extracting what you've learned. I think I kind of nailed this on the head earlier, that the things that I've learned in those degrees, those classes, the things I've learned from my experiences working in the field, they all come to me and in different ways in whatever I'm doing now. And I think you can really align, like project management is a lot like putting on an art show with a curator and a bunch of artists, and then the folks who actually build the gallery and install, and the people who pay for the everything. So I mean, it's not completely separate. And if you are you have a degree that maybe you loved at the time, but now you're realizing that you want to do something else, so it's not going to hold you back. You just need to figure out how to describe what you did or what you learned that will transfer to what you want to try out, and just go for it. Like, I get a lot of blank stares a lot when I talk about my degrees. No one in my finance world understands what I did in my past life, and that's fine. They just really trust that I know what I'm doing because I can show them what I'm doing, and I can talk through, like, yeah, I did this crazy art show once where I had to build a treehouse inside a building, and with no money, and just really scrappy examples of the things that I'm doing now, to kind of illustrate that it's all the same.
That's great. I love that example. Thanks, Jessica. And same question for Russell. Russell, did you always know your current career path? And if not, how did you go about exploring your options?
Yeah, no, great question. No, I didn't. I think I'm close in the realm of like I'm still involved in a lot of visual aesthetics, and critiquing or analyzing visual aesthetics. But my no, I really similar to Jessica, thought for sure and was like 100% confident enough to go get a really expensive master's degree in debt, that I'd be in the arts, in a more like studio or a museum or professional, even teaching kind of environment. And I guess that was part of my 5 steps a little bit too, is making sure that you're reflecting on like, are like you're not bound by this identity, and you don't have to not try things just because it's not in that prescribed idea of who you think you are, and it doesn't have to define you, and you can try more things. For me, trying more things looked maybe a little bit different in that, a lot of my freelance jobs were all trying new things. I had never programmed a website, but I was able to get this website design job and learn programming just on the job, so that was trying new things. At one of my previous jobs, I was hired to be a graphic designer, but they had an opening for web management, where it's more administrative and like not programming and design so much as like maintaining sales strategies and social media strategies and content management. And so I was like, well, I'd like to try that, and they were willing to give me that trial, and I enjoyed all that, and that kind of brought me down the path to where I'm at today, and in a lot of trial and error of like, what am I balancing, what am I interested at and have an opportunity to try, and what have I concluded from those trials that I found I was proficient at, or at least enjoyed doing. So I think it's finding those examples as they meet you and saying yes to them, and then reflecting on them, like, was this rewarding? Did I enjoy it? Is there a future in it? Are all good questions to ask.
Yeah, and just thinking of that too, reminding me of what Jessica said as well about saying yes to things and going out of your comfort zone. Really great, really great advice there. And last question, Russell, how does someone plan their career when most opportunities they're seeing are in bigger cities and they don't want to relocate? What are your thoughts on that?
So I actually think that this is a really interesting time for that question. Um, we, I would have never looked at candidates who weren't in Portland, previous to this virtual working COVID pandemic shutdown of society that we're all painfully living in. But at the moment, we have designers and writers on the brand design team that are living in Canada, are living or who had lived in Portland, but now moved to Idaho and some other rural places. um, I think that the landscape has opened up in some ways, that may have made fields a little bit more competitive, but it also means that you're not disqualified by not just being local. So keep up that virtual portfolio, your virtual persona, that you're, if you're in the visual world, that you're on those social media channels, or you have that website portfolio, because it's less pertinent that you're right here local in Portland for a Portland job than it used to be. So I don't know if that helps, but I think, building on some previous comments, don't eliminate yourself before trying, just because there are some hurdles, because maybe there are only hurdles in your own head.
I 100% agree. And one of my favorite quotes is "Don't say no to yourself." So I love that too. Jessica, how about for you? What are your recommendations for someone who is trying to plan their career path, but the opportunities they're seeing are in bigger cities and they don't want to relocate?
I think I would echo what Russell said, that I know for a fact that remote possibilities are more and more prevalent. I have seen my friends find remote only jobs and move to different states where it's closer to the family or maybe a little cheaper to live. And I think that that's great. And it does widen the playing field for everybody. So I mean, Russell really nailed it. It becomes more competitive, but does not mean that you lose your edge. And do not say no to yourself. I think that's a really great quote too. I love that.
Thank you for sharing that. And with that, I'll do a quick summary and then we'll have Russell and Jessica do their closing statements. The first thing is thank you for everyone who attended, and great to have you participate. If you need career advice, you want your resume to be reviewed, you want a consultation or attend our other events, let me know, reach out to me. I will be following up with an email with all of our LinkedIn information so that you can find us on LinkedIn and reach out. We're all definitely here to help you. And I personally learned a lot from this presentation. I hope you did too. I'll turn it to Russell to do his closing statement, and then Jessica, go ahead and follow after him.
Yeah, again, thank you all so much. It was really a pleasure to be in front of you, and hopefully life experiences, or at least my point of view on some of them, has been helpful. I think a few of the takeaways I thought about reiterating. I think that it's just so important to be flexible as a person, from the way you understand yourself and how you identify yourself, and also what's possible or what are the opportunities in front of you. Being flexible is paramount, and be generous to yourself. Everything's harder right now, but it's at least harder for everyone. And give yourself that generosity, give others that generosity, help each other out, and be reflective. If I love Jessica's idea of the career web, or I forget the terminology, but be reflective of yourself, whether that looks like a web or a journal or whatever it is that you're reflective of yourself, and where you want to be and where you are, and have a dream for yourself. And I guess those would be the big takeaways that I'd want to give you. And I really am thankful for the time you've given me. Thanks. Oh, Jessica, you're muted.
Thanks. I was just going to say it's a web or wheel of life, if anyone wants to Google that again. But I think the biggest takeaway for me this last year has been anything's possible. And as much bad things have happened, I think there's like a turn of the coin there, that like out of chaos comes growth. And so I don't know, when you're like looking for a new career during a pandemic, it might feel impossible, but just know that like anything's possible right now. Do not limit yourself because your anxiety is telling you to walk away or to stop. I mean, just follow your heart, and it's not going to go away until you do. So I really, really appreciate having this opportunity to chat with you all, and to be with this panel with you, Alia and Russell. So thank you so much for the time. And I look forward to maybe doing this again in the future.
Thank you both so much. This was a great presentation. Like I said before, I learned a lot. And thank you to our College of Liberal Arts for partnering for this program with our career programs. As always, we are here at the Alumni Association for you. We have wonderful alumni volunteers, career ambassadors, and people here who are dedicated to helping you grow in your profession. And I did see lots of great questions come up that our presenters answered. And if you have other questions, definitely don't hesitate to contact myself or our panelists to get further assistance. And you have a whole a community of people right here for you. Take care, everyone. Thank you, and we'll see you at the next webcast.